that we'd really like for everyone in this room to sign. If you can, we're putting together an effort to just get as many signatures as possible to advocate to those who are deciding if the tax credit will remain or not, trying to prompt them to let it remain, because what policy will make a bigger difference to the future trajectory of our industry over the next few years than this one? I can't think of another one that will. So in addition to the federal stuff, the other type of incentive that has just been so transformative for GEO has been the flat or per ton utility incentives. And New York has really been a leader of the United States in this regard, though many other states have adopted this as well. Con Edison has been so meaningful with a $25,000 per home. Do you guys hear that feedback? I know. Okay, I'll back up a little bit. Anyway, $25,000 per home, just like incredibly helpful for affordability for homeowners. It's actually $30,000 at this moment, but I feel like Con Ed has just been so creative and so willing to try different things to see what works in getting more GEO adoption in their territory, and I would say it's been very meaningful. We also see very generous incentives from Eversource, and per ton works well too. So Central Hudson has a per ton incentive. I think the flat or per ton model is very good because it's very easy. It's simple to understand. It's easy to calculate. It's very predictable. And so homeowners can understand what it means for them in a very straightforward way, and therefore it makes a huge difference in affecting their decision about whether to adopt GEO or just to, get the new gas furnace that they're going to get instead. So now I will move to the bad. And again, I feel like bad, it's probably not exactly right. It's like, I appreciate this direction, but I think there are some things that hold these types of incentives back, and they could be stronger and more effective. So one example that's very common in this category is subsidized loan products for homeowners, but that are unpredictable or insufficient to cover the amount that they would need to actually get geothermal. We do see that a lot of states have these programs to encourage heat pump adoption and to encourage electrification. And again, that is great. And loans are really a useful tool for getting homeowners to adopt GEO, because of course, GEO is expensive up front, but really inexpensive over time, and financing is sort of the natural solution there. But when these loans have different interest rates depending on a homeowner's income or zip code, or different loan terms, so right now there's a change coming in Massachusetts, for example, where depending on the homeowner's income, they'll be able to qualify for a loan that's 3 years or 5 years, or loans that have a low cap. So you would need to get this loan plus find a different loan in order to cover the full amount, or loans that can only be paid out after the installation is fully done. It really limits their value, and it limits their ability to impact homeowner decision. And the reason for this is that it's very hard when talking to a homeowner to say, we just met. I know you're just thinking about, might you want GEO? I might even have to explain exactly what GEO is, because you probably don't know exactly, because it's not super familiar. But can you please tell me the details of your income? Because I won't be able to tell you how much this would even cost unless you give me that very personal and sensitive information. It's just, it really kills the conversation. And so I understand the intention, of course, behind these questions. You want to have these programs be equitable. You want to give support to the homeowners that need it. But the trade-off is that when you put these sorts of conditions on these loans, they're just not used. And so, again, I would say simplicity, right? Having a loan that is the same price and a predictable price for the customer, so that it's easy to tell them, if you do this, here's how much it will cost, and here's how that compares to what you're considering as your alternative. Those will be the loans that are most likely to work. So in a similar category, and sorry that my slide formatting got a little bit messed up, I love the direction that some utilities are experimenting with to create special electrical rates that are more favorable for heat pump users and geothermal users. I think that is a direction we absolutely need to go in. However, it is very difficult for a normal homeowner to understand the value of some of these rates for them, because electricity rates in general are just hard for people to understand. It's also very hard to predict or envision how much will I be spending on electricity, especially if you're about to adopt a new electrified product that you've never used before. As a homeowner, you also won't necessarily trust the person trying to sell you that product to be accurate with how they're positioning to you how much you will be using with electricity. This is a big problem with the solar industry because, it's just, it's all uncertain and based on a lot of assumptions, and no one really knows. So all of those factors mean that a homeowner is just unlikely to really value unknown future savings caused by a different electricity rate in a way that will help them decide to use geothermal, let's say, even if it costs more up front. In other words, the value of the long-term savings to the homeowner will be heavily discounted because of all of the uncertainty and confusingness inherent in this type of structure. So I think for favorable heat pump, favorable electricity rates to work, they just need to be extremely simple and very significant. And then we have a chance. But even then, it will be less likely to influence homeowners' buying decisions than an upfront per ton or flat rebate. And then there's the ugly. So the ugly category is all of the policies that exist that make it more expensive than perhaps it needs to be to put geothermal in, especially when it compares to other options that homeowners have, like oil furnaces, for example. And these are just a few examples, but these policies exist everywhere. I don't mean to pick on these particular towns. They just were useful, specific examples. But we have everything from Williamstown, Massachusetts. We will never allow geothermal drilling, to Peekskill, New York, where the electrician must be a corporate officer of the company, which for a company like Dandelion is a bit tricky, to Irvington, New York, which requires a very extensive setup, platform, gravel pit, silt fence, just like no matter what type of drilling you're using, you got to do the things. In Sutton and Blandford, Massachusetts, permits are only reviewed in person at a meeting that takes place once per month. And in Beverly, Massachusetts, permits are only reviewed in person at a meeting that takes place once per month and only with a specific license holder present at that meeting. And the list goes on. So it's hard because there's so many towns and they all have different rules, and some of the rules are very difficult to follow, and what it results in is just cost. Like at the end of the day, the homeowner pays for this and they don't have to pay for it if they're just going to get another oil furnace. And that is a problem for our industry that we need to work to solve. Another example of a policy that's counterproductive is subsidizing gas. For example, in New York, the 100-foot rule, where if you're within 100 feet of the gas line, it is extended to you at no cost. I think with this type of law, it made a lot of sense in the past. And I just think it's hard to compete with something that's free. And so what would be great to see going forward is if there was an alternative where, what if we looked at the cost to extend that gas line and giving it as a subsidy to put in ground loops, for example. How many ground loops could you just pay for if you did that? And we've seen some really big impact of changing policies like this one. In Colorado, they got rid of the subsidy for extending gas to new housing developments. So if you're a developer building a big new housing complex, you have to pay to extend the gas lines. And that's been really helpful for Dandelion in selling these large home developers on GEO, because they look at the amount that they know that they will not have to pay to extend the gas lines, and they use that in their equation to understand what is the cost of GEO compared to the cost of gas, and it really is significant. So we're seeing a lot of interest among builders in Colorado, not just because of this, but it certainly helps. It's worth thousands of dollars to them per home. So if I look across these examples, there are certainly themes that emerge. I think number one is simplicity is good. And I would say that all of them are number one. Well, the most number one is simplicity is good. I think that this is a good mantra for our industry in general. Obviously, I love GEO. I think all of us here love GEO. That's why we're here. But if there's one loving critique I would have for our industry, it might be that sometimes GEO is a little bit complicated, and that sometimes means it's a little expensive. And I think with policy and with everything we do, just thinking about how do we make this simpler? How do we make this simple so that it can scale, so that people can understand it, so that it is less expensive is a good direction. And I certainly believe that on the policy side, when communicating with customers about the incentives that they qualify for, is of utmost importance. Number two, minimize upfront cost. Now, I don't think this is always the case. Like if you're selling GEO to a commercial customer that really has to pay those bills indefinitely, then I think operating cost savings is a great and winning message. But when you're selling to homeowners, or when you're selling to house builders or other types of customers that are making a decision about what to do today, and then maybe they're selling that house, or they're just not going to think too hard about what those bills look like on an ongoing basis, it's all about minimizing the upfront cost. Number three, permits, licenses, inspections, and rebate QA processes are useful for quality assurance, and we need to have quality in our industry. And so I do think that these things are necessary, but they're costly. And so I just think like they have benefits, but we always need to measure those benefits against the costs, because the costs are real, and I think often they're not considered. And for those of you in this room that get to decide what the rebates, licenses, inspections, and rebate QA processes should be, that's my request, is just please think about the cost in addition to the benefit, and let's just try to have a cost benefit here that is reasonable. And then number four is kind of obvious and not always up to us, but it would be nice if we stopped incentivizing the products that we would like people to stop buying, because that will help us sell more of the products that we do want them to buy, like geothermal. So that is what I have to say about the good, the bad, and the ugly about geothermal policies. Thanks again for coming, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Bye. To the two authors, let me answer the question.
Any questions?
Thank you, Elizabeth McCorvey, Family Resource Center. I'd like to see if you could speak to the refrigerants with regards to a multifamily property. I know Dandelion, I heard, does a lot of single family and then moved on to some two family. But what do you guys do? And can you use the refrigerant heads to bypass the ductwork? Like Samsung makes in the 7 family, we're in Peekskill, so since you mentioned Peekskill, I appreciate what you can do. We're trying to upgrade our 7 family. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. I certainly see the appeal of the ductless geothermal, because many buildings do not have ductwork or do not have adequate ductwork. And Dandelion as a company did experiment with the Samsung VRF product for our residential customers, though we haven't done any work with ductless multifamily. So I'm not sure our experience will exactly translate to what you're thinking about. we found that the complexity of ductless VRF for a residential homeowner was too high, and it just wasn't a viable product when we tried to go to market with it. The complexity resulted in high costs, and it was just hard to, we had a bunch of issues, honestly, with that offering, so we discontinued it, just speaking honestly. But I do think that in the multifamily case, or in the commercial case, it might be a better fit because those buildings are much more accustomed to going with ductless VRF anyway. So there's a lot more experience there. The buildings are much larger. They have more highly trained technicians that are running those systems. So I don't want you to interpret my comment to mean that it's not a possible direction in your case. I just wanted to have everyone take 30 seconds, if you have your phone, which I'm sure all of you do, to scan this QR code and sign this letter, because if there is one thing that we can all do that will make our industry flourish, it is to preserve these tax credits. And if you have other people at your organization that are not here today and you feel comfortable sending this to them, it's like numbers. You know, we're a small industry, but we need to show up and just make it clear that this tax credit matters.
Hi, Kathy. Ron Kamen, Earthkind Energy Consultant. Great to see you. Great job. And totally agree. I think you're spot on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm kind of curious because Dandelion has been evolving over time now,
Yeah.
and you've really shifted your focus a bunch. One of the questions I was wondering is, what are you guys doing for hot water when you're doing all your new projects, for a bunch of reasons?
Yeah, that is a question that even we have ourselves. For our residential, like direct-to-consumer projects, we offer our homeowners heat pump water heaters, air source heat pump water heaters, because that's what's available on the market. But I wish there were a geothermal heat pump water heater product out there. If anyone knows of one, please let me know. And it's just, it's something we're thinking about. I know that as we take on more and more new construction, so production, residential, and multifamily, it's just made that question ever more important to us because this is a solution those customers need. And it's not obvious what to do at this time. Yeah.
Courtney, Midwest Geothermal. You've done an incredible job with a lot of states in trying to look at incentives. For those of us in states that don't necessarily have incentives, have you considered putting together maybe a playbook for those of us that are looking to help our IOUs or rural electric co-ops to be able to look at some of these incentives, or how we can help educate our state in a way that they'll understand? Because I agree, we do overcomplicate things as an industry. Is there advice or other things that you could help us with to spread that a little bit further?
Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion and something that as an industry we could do a lot better at this. And I would love for Dandelion to be part of it and to work with Midwest and other companies. But I think at this point, we've had enough examples of states doing things that have really worked that we should package them, and utilities, states and utilities, and just say, here's a menu of things and they worked. Like, here's the evidence. And so as you're thinking about what to do if you want to electrify but not break the grid, or you want to get a lot of carbon reduction, here's some cost-effective measures you can take, and just to make it super simple to have those conversations. So it's not something we've done a great job at, just putting together that playbook, but I agree it's absolutely worthwhile. It's a great suggestion.
Thank you. My name is Hendricks with Will Dan Incorporated. We got our name 60 years ago when Will and Dan got together and had a beer and formed a company. How did you get your company name?
What was that last question? How did
Dandelion come up with its company name?
Oh, well, I didn't expect this question, but thank you. Okay. Well, a lot of heating and cooling companies have very literal names. So my co-founder's name was James, and a very typical name that we could have taken would have been Kathy and James's Geothermal Heating and Cooling Company. Just like the industry, that tends to be pretty typical. But we wanted to do something that was a little bit different, and I liked that. So I had the privilege of getting to work with a professional namer, because I was at Google at the time, and Google literally has a professional namer on staff, which is a real job. Her name was Amanda, and she just put together a list of, like, I don't know, a dozen possible names that were very random, but she just like, here's my list, what do you like? And then I just got to tell her my opinion, and then from my opinion she would generate another list. And eventually we got to Dandelion. But when I had my first child, I was like, where is Amanda? I need her. It's hard to name things. But yeah, what I liked about Dandelion, it's a very familiar word. It is in residential context, in yards. It changes throughout the seasons. It has that taproot. I liked all those things about it, but I couldn't tell you exactly why. That's the one that resonated with me. I'm not sure.
Hello, my name is Ed Hamzon from Mexican Capital. I don't have a question. I want to share a live experience with audience here. I'm here via a housing development company in Massachusetts, and I came to this conference to learn about this system, been working on for the past 6 months. If we cannot do geothermal in the project, we are doing about 100 units. We don't go back to all electric heat pump. We have to go back to gas. In other words, I need to explain that my tenants 2-3 years down the road, they cannot pay all electric utility bill.
Yeah.
It is real, and we are dealing with that. And we were thinking outside the box to use geothermal to offset like 40-50% of that cost. However, if we cannot underwrite this into the project, the next option is not all electric.
Yeah.
The next option is go back all the way back to gas. Because doesn't matter how much we love to be sustainable, people leave. People have to pay, and they need to. It's real. My point, just want to share that this is a live case that I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And certainly we've seen that amongst some of our customers too. Home builders that have tried to use air source, and then homeowners don't like that their utility bills double from gas, and it's a really big problem. And so I agree with you, we need to find a way to make GEO work.
Kathy, thanks for your comments and your perspective. I think there's a lot of logic in what you laid out on the variation of incentives, and it's a bit of a Sudoku to try to keep up with all of it. It's a puzzle. To benefit the audience, and just to clarify to your question or call out on domestic hot water production from geothermal systems, domestic hot water can be up to 10% of the total energy load in a family of 4 in a typical single family home. Multiple manufacturers have, for a number of years, had water-to-water domestic hot water production that operates directly off the GeoLoop, which is a much more efficient approach than a cascaded air source heat pump hot water heater that's actually putting more burden on the load of the GEO system through the air if it happens to be in the conditioned space, which many smaller dwellings, the hot water heater might be in the conditioned space. So just for the benefit of the audience, domestic hot water production on water units running directly off a ground loop is standard equipment and readily available.
All right, thanks again, everyone. I appreciate you coming.